sadly, it's not a happy topic. It's a very heavy topic. So I'll ask both of you, first of all, why do you think now it's so important to discuss this, even maybe more than it was just a few years ago?
Absolutely. This film came as a result of a lot of research, and we both were very passionate about fighting human trafficking, as I'm sure a lot of people are in this country. What we didn't realize is the extent of this crime occurring in every single American home. We basically started pre-production in 2019 and went into production at the beginning of 2020, just as COVID hit, and a lot of children went online. So that increased the access to children all over the country, all over the world. So now predators don't have to come to a playground. You know, that just doesn't happen. All they have to do is log on and be on one of the apps that kids are using, and then they have direct access to children. So we realized the numbers are just staggering. Even today, every day we get, you know, different quotes from the National Clearinghouse, National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and Homeland Security. And basically the numbers between human trafficking and sextortion are 1000% difference, with sextortion being the higher crime. Unfortunately, children are very, you know, naive. They're children, and they think that if they made a friend online, then it's a friend for real. Actually, the latest data shows that 1 in 3 children have best friend who they have never met in real life. So their best friend exists online. They've never met them, but they are their best friend, right? So we live in a day and time where it's just so easy to access children and to fool them. And that's why it's so important to talk about this right now.
Yeah, anything to add to that, Stephen? I mean, I think she pretty well covered it. It makes sense.
No, she did. I think, you know, one thing that I would just add is when we were trying to decide if we wanted to make this film, you know, we kind of took a lay of the land to see, you know, what had already been done in the space and see if there was something for us to add to the story. And we found 50 or so docs on human trafficking and 0 on this. And so it had never been done. And as Maria said, it's 1000 times more prevalent than trafficking. And so we started to realize this is actually the fastest growing crime in the world that nobody knows about.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So what role did the victims play? Did you consult with any of them in the creation of this? Like, tell me about that a little bit.
So Department of Justice and Homeland Security disclosed the Daniel Harris case for us. So we had access to all court transcripts, all victim testimonies. In that specific case, we chose not to highlight victims themselves to protect their identity and their mental health. We just reenacted parts of the interviews in the courtroom using voice actors. And later on, we realized we wanted to hear from a person, you know, and just sharing their stories. So we put out a call with Homeland Security to see who wanted to participate in the film, and we were overwhelmed by people coming forward and wanting to take their power back. A lot of victims blame themselves, and, you know, number one thing is we want them to realize it's not them, it's the predators. There's nothing that they did wrong, it's what the predators did to them. So a lot of victims wanted to prevent this from happening to other children, and that's how SM came forward. She's in a very healthy place, and it's very important from my research, it's very important for the victims of this crime to be given their power back, and also not to go into details and gory details of the crime. What's important is that this crime occurred and they are the victim, and they need to realize that, move past that, and then take their power back by educating others. So we kind of walked that line. We did not want to go into details of the crime. That's not something that we should all be interested in. We should be interested in prevention and education and how to prevent this from happening to the next child.
Okay. All right. I think. So many questions floating around in my brain and now I can't even grab one.
No, Cassie, I can just piggyback onto what Maria said there. So we're right in the middle of this 20-city screening tour right now.
Yeah.
And I just came in from San Fran last night, and at every single screening -2, I think, we've had people stand up during the Q&A with active cases of sextortion that are going on right now. In Nashville, we had 2 parents stand up and say, our 17-year-old boy just came to us 3 days ago and said this is happening to him. So we came here to find out what to do. In Orange County, a 26-year-old girl told her story before 300 people for the very first time about having this happen to her. In Phoenix, a 12-year-old stood up and was reading texts from her Snapchat account saying what had happened to her. And fortunately, she blocked the perpetrator, but because she had accepted his friend request, he then went to her best friend, and her best friend did send a photo. And so she was trying to figure out what to do. In Miami, another 12-year-old stood up and said, this is happening to my best friend right now. And the room just changes because the parents and the educators and the people in the room are hearing for the very first time. It's so quick to be like, oh, this doesn't happen here. This doesn't happen to, my kid. This only happens to kids in the fringes of society, but it's happening in every community, every socioeconomic status. There's 80,000 tips a day coming into the National Center. So when people say, oh, we don't have that problem here, I say, oh, you probably do. You just don't know about it. And we're finding that everywhere we're going, that literally people, like Maria said, they're wanting to take their power back. They're wanting to tell their story, and they're literally standing up in the middle of the Q&As to do so.
So, I mean, I feel like I'm not a parent, but if I were, that would be so terrifying. And I would just want to like take away my kid's phone and internet and just be like, you're staying in here forever. Right. But what can they realistically do? Like when they watch this, like, what do you want them to take away from it?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, we live in the world. You can't just take their phone away. Their friend is going to have a phone. Their school is going to give them an iPad. That's just not happening. I mean, we are not riding horses everywhere we go. We're riding cars, right? So we have to give them driver's license and teach them how to drive so they're safe and secure on the road. And we take time doing so, right? So the same with the phones. I mean, you're handing them a phone. I do think parents should wait until the 8th grade to give kids a phone, because I don't think it's developmentally appropriate to give them the phone earlier than that. But it's a personal choice. A lot of 10 and 8-year-olds have phones. If they do have a phone, I think it's the job of a parent to educate and tell them what can happen to them and what it looks like. If it did happen to them, what would they do? How would they approach it? Even, walk through the scenario. Like if you get in a car crash, who are you going to call first? Same thing. If somebody is targeting you online and asking you for indecent photos, what would you do? What if you're sitting there in the living room with your friend and somebody asking them for photos? What would you do? How would you go about who is your trusted adult you want to tell, and how would you tell? And if you came to me, I'm a parent of 11 and 14-year-old girl. Stephen and I are parents to preteen and teen. When we started this film, they were 9 and 12. And it's very important for kids to know that we're not going to judge them. We're going to just help them. So you can't start questioning them. Why did you do this? Or why did you do that? You kind of have to communicate, hey, this happens. We make mistakes, right? You didn't know, you were fooled. So now where do we go from there? And it's important for parents to know where they go from there, how they report these crimes, and how they take the photos down, and what they do if something did happen, or if something is happening to their kid's best friend. National Center for Missing Exploited Children has a hotline. You can report this kind of cases. You can also take down any kind of inappropriate photos that have been put up by someone else. And there is a process. It's not very hard to report these crimes, and law enforcement will get involved. And it's very important to preserve the messages that are on the phone so they can catch the perpetrator, because usually they have hundreds of victims. And even if the child thinks they're the only victim, there's usually 200 to 300 more victims out there that are being terrified, the perpetrator is going after.
Yeah, and then just to add to that too is, one of my favorite lines in the movie is, we need to have the conversation with our kids that if this happens to you, you're not going to get in trouble. And most importantly, we're not going to take away your phone. Because what we're hearing so often is that teens don't want to tell that this has happened to them because they're afraid they're going to lose their phone. And so then they try to do it on their own. And so that's one of the biggest takeaways that I try to tell these audiences, is make sure that your kid knows you can come to them. You're not going to take away their phone. Paul Wolpert, so the case in the movie, there was only one girl that told, and 100 other victims ended up being saved because she had the courage to tell. And then he's now working a case right now with a perpetrator in Northern Ireland. Only one person told, and because of that one person, he found 200 other victims. And when he went to every single one of those 200 victims, they had never told anybody. So that's another big thing we're trying to say, is that it only stops when you tell. They're going to try to keep you in this prison for as long as they can. But if you tell a trusted adult, and if the trusted adults make it clear that you're not going to lose your phone, it'll make it easier for them to come forward. And so we found that to be super, super important.
Another thing that I noticed just watching is it affects so many people, because you can see the people who are investigating these crimes are just torn apart by it. I mean, it's hard to imagine doing this every day and then going home and just being able to like set that aside,
Yes, coming from, outside looking in, we've been keynoting several of these conferences for crimes against children. We went to Atlanta Internet Crimes Against Children conference and showed the film. We went to Dallas Crimes Against Children, which is the biggest crimes against children conference in the world. And it's definitely taking a toll on mental health of agents. It's also, I believe that's why we have such a wide support from law enforcement and government for this film, is because they're overwhelmed by these cases. And honestly, prevention and education is just the only way to stop it. They cannot catch every single predator, every single perpetrator, just because there are so many of them. And a lot of them are out of the country, but a lot of them are in the country. So they simply don't have enough agents working these cases. They don't have enough resources. So they're playing catch up. What we need to do is educate and prevent, so the kids don't get into this kind of situations. And I think there is a huge lack of education and prevention. I keep talking about Encanto and the song, let's not talk about Bruno, no. And we don't talk about sextortion, with our kids. We don't want to talk about it. We want to keep our head in the sand, but it's actually not doing anybody any favors. I think the more we bring this subject to the light, what can happen and why, and what are the red flags to look out for is, the way forward.
To add to that, Stephen?
Yeah, so Erin Burke from the film told us while we were filming, she said, if I had every single agent on my team working 24/7, 365, we simply could not keep up with the caseload. And so, like Maria said, like, we have to shift towards prevention. And we believe that, no parent wants their child to be, caught up in this. No child wants to be caught up in this kind of thing. And so we think that using the power of film, it's kind of like an empathy machine. It helps you to be able to see things in a new way. And that's one of the things we're really excited about, using the power of film to change the world. So if we can get this message out, like Maria said, and shift to prevention, then we think that, like, parents like ourselves and this new generation coming up can be leaders in this space to stay safe online and make sure it doesn't happen to them, and also make sure it doesn't happen to their friends.
So would you say the main takeaway, if you wanted people to take away one thing, would be that word prevention? Is that accurate?
Education. Yeah, definitely prevention, education, and just how easy this case can happen. The MO changes I mean, the apps change, but the ammo doesn't change. It's the same pattern they use as they used 15 years ago, 10 years ago. Just the apps, the technology change, encryption changes, but it's the same story. I like you, you look pretty. Send me a photo of yourself. Send me a more revealing photo of yourself. I really like you. I think we should date. Bam, it changes on a dime. And then now I have your photo. I'm going to release it to your friends. And a lot of photos have geolocators, which kids don't realize. So that when the predator says, I know where you live, they actually do. That's unfortunate part of, you know, developing technology. So it just doesn't change, and all we can do is educate. This is how it happens. These are the red flags. Just stay safe.
Yeah, because in the film, you know, our case that we highlight, it was a Facebook and a Skype thing. Today, a lot of it's happening on Snapchat and some on TikTok. And in 5 years, it's probably going to be something we've never even heard of. That's going to be the new thing. But the MO, like Maria said, stays the same. And all of the folks we've talked to on the front lines that are investigating these crimes say it never changes. It's always the same way. It's just going to be a different thing. So if we can educate, you know, what to look out for, then it could be on something we've never heard of before, but at least we can do a better job of keeping our kids safe.
Yeah, it almost seems like something you would wish they would start to teach in school, like in health classes or things like that, maybe someday, right?
Yeah, and that's what we are doing too. We've created 3 different modules with National Center for Missing Exploited Children with that are small snippets from the film stories, 5-minute video modules. And actually the agents from Homeland Security and other law enforcement is going to be able to take these clips into schools when they do safe internet days and educate people. We have discussion guides that are Q&As, what questions to ask. And kind of get the kids engaged, because they're not going to sit there and listen, you know, read a chapter on this, but they will watch a 5-minute video clip when, you know, somebody tells their story and then discuss it. So yeah, that's definitely the next step, is get this into schools on a large scale.
Yeah, and that's something, Cassie, you can really help with your audience too, because what I've been hearing from the local task forces working in this space as we've been taking it around the country is that schools are often very reluctant to talk about this subject. And law enforcement wants to do it. And we are creating these resources so that they can go in with these short modules and questions. And it's a conversation that the kids are already know about it, but the schools don't necessarily want to talk about it. And it should be required viewing in every middle school and especially high school. And so if your audience can say, wow, you know, go to the website, sextortionfilm.com, see the resources that are there, and then request this to be something, because, you know, your audience is going to have a local connection with a school somewhere where their kids are. And that's the way it's going to start to change, is getting it into these places to where it becomes something that we talk about all the time.
Yeah, and not such a taboo, because right now it still feels very much like it's a taboo subject. So it sounds like you had a really positive, I mean, sad reaction, but positive. You said you're in the middle of a tour right now. Just tell me quickly about that, how that's going.
So we just finished the West Coast leg of our tour. We screened the film at USC, and then in Orange County, and in Denver, Colorado, and in San Jose, California, and in Phoenix, Arizona, and everywhere we go, we have large audiences, parents and kids. Very, very positive reception. A lot of victim, unfortunately, stories coming forward. We are starting our East Coast tour this Sunday. We're starting with Washington, D.C., and a lot of big agencies are coming. The politicians are coming, the government agencies are coming to view the film because they think it's very important. And we are trying to work on the next step, what we're going to do with the film and how we're going to educate the public. And then we're going to go up the East Coast to New England, and we will end up back in LA. We're doing a limited theatrical run in Los Angeles, NoHo 7 theater, September 30th through October 6th. And then the film will be released on October 4th on TVOD, on iTunes globally.
Yeah, we've also been invited to screen the film for, the European Parliament next month in Brussels. The
Wow.
Australian and the Dutch parliaments have reached out. The Pentagon has now invited us to come. So it's like it's super exciting because we really feel like that, people in decision making, sometimes they just don't know that it's a problem. They don't realize there were 29 million reports made last year, and that's expected to go up again this year. But also sometimes when you look at stats and statistics, you just kind of like zone, and you
Yeah.
don't necessarily, it doesn't necessarily move you to action. And so the fact that we can have a story, with a dramatic arc and real emotion and real, survivor stories to it, I think it moves the heart. And so things can really start to change. And we're hoping by using the power of the documentary that we can start to make these numbers go the other way.
Amazing. Well, I hope that for you too. Is there anything that I didn't ask or like anything that you guys want to add?
I just want to add, this is a PG film. It's not that scary to watch. You can watch it out 10-year-old, 11-year-old seen it, a 13, 14-year-old seen it. It's a film to just sit and watch with your kids and discuss this crime. It's not gory. It doesn't go into details. It just educates and it keeps your attention. It's not a lecture. So I definitely encourage parents to watch it. And discuss it, because it's much better to discuss and to spend 20-30 minutes discussing this crime when then dealing with an aftermath. Unfortunately, trauma that relates to these crimes lasts for years and affects entire family of the child and their future trajectory in their romantic relationships and love relationships. It damages the soul of a child, basically, because this is their first introduction into sexuality, and it goes sideways, then a lot of things go wrong afterwards. So I would encourage to just watch, prevent, educate, don't stay away from the subject.
Yeah, Stephen, how about you?
Yeah, I was just going to say the big takeaway for us is, if you could, go to the film website, sextortionfilm.com, you'll learn a bunch of things, but there's also a pre-order link there. And, we made it as inexpensive as iTunes would let us. So it's only $10 for the movie. And all the profits are going to nonprofits that are working on keeping our kids safe online. But if, any of your audience would like to help the film, to pre-order the film, we'll help it to chart when it comes out on October 4th, and that raises the profile of the film. It also catches the attention of all the streamers and just allows the film to reach a bigger audience. And so that would be a big takeaway for us. And then use those small resources, and download the film and watch it, with your small group at your church, or whatever situation that looks like in your circles, because we can start to turn the tide if this movie gets out there. So, and thank you so much for letting us talk about it.
Of course. Yeah, it's such an important thing. I mean, I'm sure like researching this and stuff, you guys probably know about that show To Catch a Predator, because I have watched that show like many, many times. And I know they got rid of it because I believe someone wound up killing himself. But I really wish they would bring that show back, because there are just so many people. It's just not hard. It's not hard to find these people who are trying to victimize these kids. And that show was 10 or 15 years ago. So it's, it's changed. It's changed how it looks, but like you said, it's the same story,
Yeah,
different.
and we realize that a lot, more people do know about those kind of situations where they actually meet, in real life. But what I guess a lot of people aren't understanding yet is that almost 100% of those cases start online.
Yeah.
So they reach out to them on their social media or whatever that
Right.
looks like, and it can go in a few different ways. Sometimes sextortion does lead to trafficking, or in some very tragic cases. And we've also had multiple tragedies that happened this year. On Tuesday night, I was on the stage with the mom of Ryan Last in San Jose, California, whose son was, he took his life 6 hours after initial contact and being sextorted. And he was a brilliant, bright kid. And so we're gonna, be telling some of those stories, because those stories need to be told to make sure it doesn't happen again.